And finally, our main event, Glover Teixeira versus Jamahal Hill for the vacant light heavyweight title. Like I said at the beginning, Yuri Prochazka relinquished the title when he injured his shoulder. I guess it was a terrible shoulder injury, like Dana White said, one of the worst ones they'd ever seen. So he relinquishes the title, and Jamahal Hill steps up to fight Glover Teixeira. And this is a matchup where Jamahal Hill's a betting favorite this weekend. And I'll be honest, I got money on Glover. I know he's 43, and I know that this is a tough fight against a young, powerful, dangerous guy in Jamahal Hill. His only loss, by the way, is to a guy earlier on the card, Paul Craig, where Craig broke his arm with the armbar and then triangled him and just elbowed him from that position. His arm's just like flopping around. That's the only loss on Jamahal Hill's record, right? Is a guy who's opening up this card against Johnny Walker. Jamahal Hill has rebounded, though, from that loss, right? And since then, he's picked up wins over Jimmy Crute by KO, Johnny Walker by KO, and Thiago Santos by KO in the fourth round. And that going into the fourth round like that, I think that gives you some confidence going into this weekend because you know that you can go deep into a fight and finish a guy. Here's the thing, though. And there's two things to consider, right, I think, with Glover and going into this. First, he is 43, and he's coming off of a war against Yuri Prochazka. And you hear guys, like Joe Rogan says this all the time, right? Or like people say this all the time, I guess. I don't know if it's, I think I've heard it on Joe's podcast, whether he actually said it, I don't know. But that wars kind of take a piece of you, right? Like they take something from you when you have them. And Glover's 43, and it makes you wonder how many of those wars he has left in him, if it turns into that, right? The other thing, though, to consider with Glover, on the flip side of that, right, is that he looked good in his last fight. I didn't see the significant drop-off in a guy who didn't look competitive. I know Yuri finished him at the end, but he looked good, man. I mean, he was catching kicks, timing his takedowns. He boxes his way into his takedowns. He'll get you up against the cage and work from there. He wears on you, and if he's unsuccessful, he will go for it again, right? He's good at reversing position from the bottom. Glover Teixeira is fucking crafty on the ground. And let's not forget that he submitted Thiago Santos. And Thiago Santos gave Jamahal Hill a lot of issues in the wrestling department. I just think that Santos is unfamiliar with fighting that style of fight, so it tired him out much more quickly, and that's why we saw Jamahal Hill not taking anything away from the knockout. But I think that's why those opportunities were there for him to knock Santos out, is because Santos was tired from fighting that style of fight. Glover is not going to get tired from fighting that style of fight. And if he can go out and immediately push Hill backwards, and if Hill overextends on something, and he's in a big moment right now. He's in a title fight relatively early on in his career, right? So if Glover can come out and capitalize on these things, and Glover has a chin, man. I mean, like, I know he's been knocked out and he's been through it, but like, he can take a shot too. You saw that from the Yuri fight. So the question is, if Jamahal lands, does it go? But all in all, I just have a really strong feeling that Glover Teixeira goes out and gets it done. If he can go out, like I was going to say, sorry, I got sidetracked. That happens often. But if he can go out when they're dry and get a hold of Jamahal Hill early and press things up against the cage, there are going to be real opportunities for him there to submit Jamahal Hill. I don't think Jamahal Hill's felt anybody in the UFC grapple like Glover can grapple, and I think that he's going to be surprised when he gets a hold of him, because the opportunities that Jamahal Hill had to stand up against Thiago Santos aren't going to be as readily available against Glover Teixeira. I like Glover in this matchup, man. I think this is a big spot for Hill, and it's relatively sudden, despite the fact that he's young in his career, and he no doubt has a chance. His hands are dangerous. He could go out there and fucking like... There's something different about the way that guys who have serious power hit, and there is something different about the way that Jamahal hits you, right? So if he can go out there and land on Glover and get him working and keep Glover on the back foot and stave off some of those takedown attempts, he has a real chance, right? But I like Glover this weekend. And again, this isn't betting advice. I'm just telling you what I'm doing. I'm putting 3 units on Glover to win because he's the underdog, man. And I think that his style is favorable, and I don't think that I saw enough degradation in his techniques in his fight against Yuri to bet against him in this fight. I thought he looked like world champion material for where the light heavyweight division is at right now. And that fall off can sometimes happen very suddenly, so I could be wrong in that. But I think in a guy in Jamahal Hill, I think he's just still, say what you want, a little, I don't know, tough definitely, but just a little bit green for this spot. And I think Glover has a favorable matchup, right? Unless he gets fucking clipped like he did against like Anthony Johnson or some shit. Like I said, I think that's Jamal's method. his best probably method of victory, right? That's his most likely method of victory. But as the fight wears on and this becomes a fight, I like Glover